Introduction. The subjects that will be discussed in this book are closely and directly related to self-knowledge. The question of the relationship between body and mind comprises one of the most important components in many serious texts that tackle the issue of self-knowledge. However, in most of the works previously published in this field, mind and thought have been the main focal points, and the role that the body plays on the path to self-knowledge has been either ignored or not discussed as it should be. In other words, the emphasis has constantly been on the knowing mind and on thought as the product of the mind. In most famous works in the field of self-knowledge, there are multiple definitions of the mind, but no specific definition that pictures the body and clearly distinguishes it from the mind. Many of these works fail to even acknowledge the mind's huge mistake in considering itself to be the same as the body. Correcting this oversight can cause an immensely deep and revolutionary effect on one's perception of self. In this book, perhaps for the first time, all our attention and energy will be focused on demystifying our illusory description of the body and on delineating the very first step on the path to self-knowledge. We will try to reach conclusions by discussing only completely objective issues, which should be readily understood by any intelligent reader. The subject of this book concerns the mistiest and vaguest aspects of man's mind. However, the argument is based on ordinary daily observations of the physical world, so the reader does not need to have even an elementary knowledge of any philosophy, religion, thought system, or belief system in order to connect with the discussion in this book. I am not going to offer you a new belief system or even new knowledge. Rather, I am going to ask you to exhaustively examine the authenticity of the assumptions you take for granted. It could be said that this book is about coming to a better understanding of the physics of daily observations rather than about psychological or mystical issues, although it deals ultimately with the deepest topics discussed in the sphere of self-knowledge. Who am I? What is the self? These are well-known questions which have been articulated by many people, famous or not, since antiquity. They occur to almost everyone at one time or another. Many different answers have been offered. Some have many elements in common, others are very different, if not opposite. Every school of thought, religious, irreligious, or anti-religious, has offered its own answer. Except for special cases to be clarified later, all these systems, using their own specific terms, try to describe what the self, the ego, the I, or personal identity is. For instance, one ideology may deem the self as a collection of evil desires. Another may consider it to be the same as the soul. Some regard it as a form of memory. Still others regard it as a specific level of consciousness. It has also been viewed as a series of complicated procedures in the nervous system, the collection of deeds in previous lives, or a component of universal consciousness. We will not discuss any of these systems and descriptions, or even try to validate or renounce them, simply because our discussion precedes all these discussions regarding logical and analytical arguments. Regardless of the minor or major differences between those thought systems, most of them share a common feature. They attempt to explain what the self or personal identity is. Believing that this is a weakness in those arguments, I instead approach the issue by using a method that can be considered as solving the problem by reversing it. This reverse approach entails discovering what the self is not, rather than focusing on what the self is. This, of course, poses enormous new challenges for the mind, but I believe it is the most precise, direct, and effective way to approach the self question. That is, the question of what is self, or who am I? I believe this approach is the most honest, and therefore the most difficult, way to tackle the issue. You should be ready for severe blows that can destroy the foundations of your conventional perceptions. In my opinion, the greatest mistake committed in finding the answer to who am I is that we do not approach the issue free of presumptions and biases. People usually tackle the question by relying on a series of preconceptions, which they believe to be true, and then forward the answers according to those beliefs and presuppositions. It is obvious that if those presuppositions do not have logical foundations or are not compatible with physical facts, they will result in invalid, illogical, and illusory conclusions. By illusory, I mean whatever contradicts facts, physical reality, and objective experience. This discussion will not go beyond the physical laws that govern our daily lives. In fact, there is no need to go beyond those laws. You will find the discussion simple, natural, and tangible. For instance, I do not intend to observe or analyze the findings of quantum physics here. Our discussion throughout the book will be quite simple and remain in the context of daily life. Hence, any mind that is able to observe and comprehend ordinary experiences is all you will need to understand the arguments. In order to follow the text, you will not need to be a mystic, scientist, physicist, philosopher, or psychologist, or have any extraordinary mental ability. However, as with any question, you will need to be alert and attentive in order to find solutions. Needless to say, an attentive mind is one that has an interest in the issue at hand. In other words, a bit of interest is all you need to start. Fortunately, I can assume that this interest is already there from the fact that you already have the book in your hands. I believe your interest will increase as you continue reading. In order to avoid oversimplification, let me point out another factor whose presence is required for us to continue forward. For without it, our progress on the path will be slow, if not completely stalled. Lacking this attitude, one would be trapped within old webs of beliefs, which would make it difficult to achieve fresh visions and perceptions. This essential factor is nothing but the courage we must have when we face new perceptions. This factor is not limited to the present discussion, but is an element of every discovery that raises doubts about or even demolishes previous beliefs. Daring to doubt the validity of our beliefs and having the courage to seek new methods are the foundations of any creative and innovative action. I would like to clarify that questioning certain beliefs does not necessarily mean that they are false or that we will inevitably conclude that they will be refuted. Another subject worth mentioning is that the issues covered in this book, if not foundational themselves, can complement your elementary concepts of self-knowledge. Reading this book and developing even a basic understanding of it will help you to have a deeper appreciation of the teachings of the masters of self-knowledge. However, it is my hope that reading this work will give you such a deep understanding of the self and the world around you that you will be less likely to need the experiences and teachings of others on the path.